1880, he was spellbound by its colorful walls. The Grand Canyon's walls are made up of rock layers, each representing a distinct period of Earth's history. And some of the lower rock beds deep down in the Grand Canyon looked kind of tilted. Dutton knew these layers were made up of very old sediments. Originally, they had been laid down as horizontal beds, mostly in rivers or shallow seas. Then the sediments hardened over time and geologic forces pushed some of the layers upward at an angle. As time passed, the tops of these tilted layers were sheared off by erosion, and later, new layers of sediment, which stayed more or less horizontal, were deposited right on top of them. And he knew every step of this process took time, because you generally don't get horizontal layers on top of tilted ones unless there's an age difference between them. In his examinations of the Grand Canyon, Dutton got a first-hand look at what geologists call an unconformity. Basically, that's a gap in the geological record. It shows that sedimentation didn't happen continuously, and that there's an age difference between sets of rock layers, and sometimes that age gap can be millions of years or more. In 1882, Dutton named this particular break the Great Unconformity. At first, nobody realized just how great it was. Today we know from radiometric dating that the rocks directly on top of the Great Unconformity were laid down during the Cambrian period, about 500 million years ago. But in some places, the rocks below this Great Unconformity are about 1.2 billion years older. That's a big gap. I mean, the Earth itself is only about 4.5 billion years old. So at this spot in the Grand Canyon, 25% of the planet's entire history is gone. Those layers just aren't there anymore. And the Grand Canyon isn't the only place where this happens. You can see the gap from Siberia to Antarctica and plenty of spots in between. Scientists are still trying to figure out what caused the Great Unconformity, but they have some ideas. This missing chapter in Earth's history might be linked to a fracturing supercontinent, out-of-control glaciers, and maybe, just maybe, the diversification of life itself. Sedimentary rock layers are formed by a process called deposition, when eroded geological materials, like sand, are laid down by wind, water, or even ice. They accumulate to build up layers of sediment that later turn into rock. And when you've got a layer of rock that's distinct from everything above and below it, that's called a stratum. Pile up a bunch of strata on top of each other, with each level representing one span of time, and together they'll create a rock sequence. And an unconformity is a boundary dividing two strata with an age difference between them. An unconformity might mean that no new material was deposited at this place for a long time, interrupting the rock sequence. But this isn't always the case. Usually unconformities are made when an entire layer gets eroded away somehow. And it turns out that the Grand Canyon's picturesque walls are full of unconformities. For example, there's a 150 million year gap between two strata of limestone, a layer from the early Carboniferous period and another one from the Cambrian period. But that's nothing compared to the Great Unconformity. It begins under the Tapete Sandstone, a stratum laid down by the ancient tides of a shallow sea about 508 to 501 million years ago during the Cambrian. Below this, you'll find a stretch of 1.75 billion-year-old metamorphic rock called the Vishnu Schist, along with tilted rock layers ranging between 1.25 billion and 740 million years old, known as the Grand Canyon Supergroup. And figuring out what happened in that gap is the key to explaining the existence of the Great Unconformity. Right now, we're living in the Phanerozoic Eon, which began 541 million years ago at the dawn of the Cambrian period. But before the Phanerozoic, there was the Proterozoic, a much longer eon that kicked off some 2.5 billion years ago. And yeah, that's billion with a B. The Proterozoic saw the rise and fall of 3 supercontinents, and the last one is known as Rodinia. Scientists think that it formed between 1.3 billion and 900 million years ago, and when it was fully assembled, Rodinia contained just about all the known continents that were around at the time. But supercontinents don't last forever. Rodinia started breaking apart around 750 million years ago, well before the Cambrian started. And its breakup might have been linked to something else that happened late in the Proterozoic. It would have been another major event, and a pretty cool one. Literally. Since the 1930s, scientists have been finding evidence that glaciers were common at the equator late in the Proterozoic. Places like Western North America and Southern Australia were tropical or subtropical back in those days. And if you look at deposits from the late Proterozoic, you'll find a haphazard mixture of sand, mud, gravels, and boulders. Those deposits are called tillites, and they're the material that gets left behind by glaciers. In places that were at low latitudes during the late Proterozoic, geologists often find these tillites sandwiched between limestone beds that probably developed in warm tropical waters. This finding, along with paleomagnetic data and other clues, gave rise to the snowball Earth hypothesis, which I've talked about before. According to this idea, glaciers once covered all or most of the world's surface, from the poles all the way down to the equator. And this may have happened more than once in the late Proterozoic. So there could have been multiple snowball Earth episodes, with the first starting around 716 million years ago and the last one ending just 635 million years ago. And these cold periods might be related to the Great Unconformity, but how depends on who you ask. Either the formation of the Great Unconformity was part of what caused Snowball Earth, or Snowball Earth was what formed the Great Unconformity. One study published in 2018 made the case that the Great Unconformity helped set up the start of Snowball Earth. It looked at North America's Ozark Plateau, where 500-million-year-old Cambrian sandstone sits on top of granite that's 1.4 billion years old. Here, as in the Grand Canyon, the Great Unconformity is plain to see. To date the Great Unconformity, they used uranium isotopes and helium trapped in zircon crystals. From those crystals, they concluded that the area was tectonically uplifted and eroded from about 850 to 680 million years ago, and this coincides with the breakup of Rodinia. Tectonic uplift on a big scale may be a side effect of fragmenting supercontinents. In this case, the study's authors think several kilometers of rock were lifted up only to get whittled down by erosion. Since the Ozarks were really far inland back then, the scientists think there was a continental-wide, maybe even worldwide outbreak of large-scale erosion. If this really was a global phenomenon, it may be what created the Great Unconformity, eroding away rock layers that now appear as gaps in the geological record. And there's more. The authors think the erosion of all that Proterozoic bedrock affected the climate by capturing large quantities of carbon in the Earth and its oceans, keeping it out of the atmosphere. That's because rainwater often pulls carbon from the atmosphere during the weathering process. Since rainwater is weakly acidic, it dissolves rock and releases ions. These ions can get washed into the ocean where they form calcium carbonate, which is eventually buried and traps the carbon in the rock. And carbon's a key component of greenhouse gases, so if a lot of carbon didn't end up in the atmosphere, that might have promoted global cooling, along with other factors like volcanic events and a dimmer sun. And as the world grew colder, glaciers could have gone unchecked. In other words, welcome to Snowball Earth. So, according to this timeline of events, Rodinia's breakup resulted in lots and lots of erosion. And not only did that erosion create the Great Unconformity, but it also impacted the climate, helping to set the stage for Snowball Earth. But not everyone agrees. A different study published in 2019 argues the opposite, that Snowball Earth's glaciers created the Great Unconformity by grinding up the surface of our planet. The glaciers would have eroded away a lot of the outer continental crust, dumping it into the oceans. This massive increase of eroded material would have also increased the amount of crust being driven down into the Earth's mantle, where some of it was recycled into fresh magma and sent back towards the surface. And the evidence of this comes, again, from isotopes trapped in zircon crystals. But this time, they're isotopes of the element hafnium. Some hafnium isotopes are more likely to form at the surface than down in the mantle, and that signature is preserved. This can show where the isotopes came from. And remember, zircons are also used in radiometric dating. So by looking at the ratios of different hafnium isotopes in these zircons and dating the zircons themselves, the researchers figured that the crust erosion and recycling probably happened after Snowball Earth started. And this is because they found a lot of surface hafnium trapped in the zircons, and the zircons formed after Snowball Earth got underway. So if that's true, the erosion and all the crust recycling that would have gone with it could not have set up Snowball Earth. Instead, it could have been glaciers that stripped away over 1 billion years worth of rock layers, creating the Great Unconformity. Or at least that's the hypothesis. Hopefully, future research will tell us which came first, the snowball or the unconformity. But either way, the loss of so much material could have been important for life on Earth. complex life really diversified during the Ediacaran period, which closed out the Proterozoic, and then life exploded during the Cambrian. Scientists have wondered if this might be related to Snowball Earth and the Great Unconformity. Some researchers have suggested that when all that crust was destroyed, it fundamentally changed the ocean's chemistry. The weathering process might have transported a lot of geologic material from land to the sea. As a result, scientists think our oceans were filled with calcium, potassium, iron, phosphorus, and other vital elements. This could have revolutionized life on our planet by giving it the chemical building blocks it needed to really get going. One hypothesis even suggests that these new ingredients help to encourage biomineralization, the process by which living things create minerals for their shells and skeletons. So maybe when Clarence Dutton first saw the Great Unconformity way down in the Grand Canyon, he was actually looking at the calling card of a phenomenon that made his own existence possible. I must give big shout-outs to all these researchers who consulted on this episode. Your input was greatly appreciated. Also, grand high fives to this month's Eontologists: Patrick Seifert, Jake Hart, John Davison-Eam, Sean Dennis, and Steve. Become an Eonite by pledging your support at patreon.com/eons. And thank you for joining me in the Constantine Haase studio. If you like what we do here, subscribe at youtube.com/eons.
To go.
So you became a federal agent pre 9/11.
I did.
You were in New York then, I'm assuming, on 9/11.
Our offices were in 7 World Trade Center.
Where were you that day?
I was in the office. I went in early. I was working on a case. I was trying to find this Frenchman who was committing fraud, and I believed he was in Canada.
Goddamn Frenchman.
He was in Canada. And I went in early, and I was in the office, and I heard first plane. So before I answer, because I think I know where you're going with this, when you've obviously been in situations, and do you ever struggle talking about them sometimes? Because you feel like maybe you're doing an injustice by speaking about it, or elevating yourself, or I'm not sure if I'm articulating it right, but do you ever feel...
I don't. I try, and I have always tried to be just as objective and honest as I can be, and that includes my own behavior in those situations. I'll probably err on the side when I talk about things in my past of telling people how I screwed up more than when I was successful, because I prefer to leave it to my peers and the people that I was there with to talk about any successes I may have had. So it's easier for me in that respect to just try to be blanket honest with it. Like, hey, this is what I experienced. Somebody's experience might have been different. This is what I saw. But I've been able to navigate that well by just having that as the baseline with which I operate from.
So, yeah, full disclosure, it's always been hard for me to discuss that day, because I guess I always felt that all these people died, and I didn't. I survived, and I always really had a struggle, and I always felt internally I shouldn't discuss it as much, and it was hard for me. I wrote about it in the book, and it's really been, you have this part of you, it's like, should I even be talking about this? Is it wrong for me to share my story? So I was just curious to see how you perceive something like that.
Well, I didn't have any direct, you obviously have deep ties to New York, so I think that day outside of the federal job probably would have had a pretty big impact. I had no direct connection to that.
You joined pre-9/11.
I did. I joined in 96.
You were like a baby when you joined.
Well, they don't actually take babies. I was 18, so yes, I was still a baby. Emotionally, I was probably 9 at the time I joined the military when they gave me my first machine gun. It's not a good call. Right now, I'm currently sitting at like 18 emotionally, and I'm 42. I turned the TV on about 10 seconds before the second plane went live. I had no idea what was going on. I literally just woke up, turned the TV on. So 9/11 for me was more of a shift in my life because it was a drastic shift in my occupation. But I didn't, there was no issues with talking about it, or what I would describe, a lot of people say, is survivor's guilt, because A, I wasn't there, and B, I had no direct attachment to it. There are issues from...
What about your tactical stuff?
That's what I was going to say. There's plenty of situations where I fell completely short of the standard that I set for myself, and there are days where I feel like I met the standard. And there were most of the days in my military career were awesome. I mean, the people I worked with were great. In large, every weed lawn has weeds, to include the SEAL teams. So most people I worked with were great, and I try to minimize the time with the people I didn't want to work with. Most of the time we had overwhelming tactical success on the battlefield because we had tactical and technological advantage, which is awesome, and it felt great to go over there and feel like you're making a difference. And then there's sometimes where it's a complete and utter shit show, and your good friends died, and things that were outside of your control occurred, and you struggle with it, and a helicopter would go down. You're like, why wasn't I on that helicopter? Or somebody would get blown up or shot, and well, I went through that door too. Why didn't that happen to me? And I guess for me, it may be cathartic to talk about it. But again, I just try to go with just full honesty. Like, hey, this is what happened. This is what I was trying to do. This is what I was actually able to do. And I'll just stand in judgment of my peers.
I hear that. So for us on that day, it was, it's such a difficult thing to talk about, but because it's healing. I had gone into work, and we were in 7 World Trade Center, and I was trying to work on this case, and we're sitting there. I was with the liaison, I want to say with customs at the time, and we hear the sound outside, and I honestly didn't realize it was a plane. I just heard this loud sound.
How close was where you were to, which tower was hit first? Was it 1 World Trade Center?
I should know this. I want to say, I always mix the towers up. I don't remember which one offhand was hit first. It was the one closest to my building.
Okay.
It was the one, I want to say it's the North Tower. The one that was closest north. No, I don't want to say because I can't remember at the moment. So the way it's set up, World Trade Center, it was Tower 1, Tower 2, and then around the towers at the base, it was World Trade Center 4, 5, 6, these lower buildings. And then right adjacent to that, they built 7 World Trade Center, which was about 47 stories. And
so we're only talking a couple blocks.
No, it's not a couple blocks. It's like across the street. They're right next to each other. So everything's in the same vicinity. Literally, to get to the tower, because our parking garage was actually underneath the towers. So I'd go in, I'd park under the towers, the 2 big towers, and then just cross. There was a walkway. I just crossed the walkway, and now I'm in 7 World Trade Center. So we are there. You hear the loud sound. Didn't even occur to me that was an explosion. Everybody goes to the windows. Some people still aren't there because it was still early, and I look out and I see this big fire, this blazing fire coming from the top of the tower, the first tower that had been hit. It was up top high. And I remember thinking, it was a very benign thought. I remember thinking, I think it's an electrical fire. It didn't even, none of us had any idea that a plane or anything, zero, completely clueless. And then on the PA system, they say everybody comes on, it says everybody evacuate, everybody evacuate. So not knowing what's going on, I remember I run up to my desk, and I grab my gun in my bag, because I was just like, I have to leave. I didn't know what was going on. We evacuate, we go down, and then as we go down into the lobby, it was a floor-to-ceiling glass, the lobby of the 7 World Trade, and you just saw chunks of steel coming down. People couldn't exit, so then the building security were pushing people out through the sky. And they're just yelling to everybody evacuate. I remember pausing, and I think at the time I was by myself thinking, I'm not evacuating. If we don't evacuate, I'm not supposed to evacuate. And I started looking around for my colleagues. And I found a small group of colleagues, maybe about 6 of them, and I said, what do we do? They're like, let's go get our medical kits. We had these medical kits that were called FAT kits. So we go up, these things were huge and heavy. We had everything in there, so we go up. And we went to the area where we stored our weapons and our kits. They were all in the same area. We obviously didn't grab weapons because we didn't really think we needed them. We still didn't know what was going on. We grabbed the medical kits, and we go down and then out through the side of 7 World Trade to go towards the tower that had been hit to try to get in to help the injured people, because we knew people were going to be injured and wounded. And as we were walking toward the tower to go into it, then I just heard a really loud sound. It sounded like an engine revving. And it was coming from above. I didn't see it, and one of the agents that was with me, he grabbed my arm and he yanked me. And I didn't really understand what was happening. He starts pulling me, and he starts pulling me back in the direction of where we came. And then I just see everybody running, and then I hear the sound of the plane. I don't know it's a plane. I don't understand it's a plane. I just hear the sound. I'm thinking, is it a missile? What is this? And we run, and then just as we're running, sure enough, at that time, the plane hits the other tower, and all the debris comes shooting out, and it's shooting out in our direction. And so it's just literally, Andy, it's just raining chunks of
building,
steel and fireball. It was. There are no words to describe it. They're stuff they show on air. They don't show. It just doesn't. There's no justice to what it really was.
Yeah.
So we just run, and I remember the agent actually landed on top of me and slammed me up against the concrete wall. There was a wall there, and he slammed me up. And he shielded me. He put his body over mine. Just a friend, a colleague. And just instinctually, he tried to protect me. And we sat there and we waited for the rain of stuff to stop. And I remember just looking around, just seeing people just getting smacked with chunks of steel.
Yeah.
And you were either there or then you were gone. It was a very surreal thing to experience. So when that happened, it occurred to us, all right, we still didn't know it was a plane, by the way. No clue. We realized this is something else. This is an attack, a terrorist attack, some type of attack.
Yes.
And so now the way we were going in is now blocked because now the second plane came and put all that debris and fire in our path. So we had to go around a different way. And then actually, as we went around that way, some NYPD cops stop us and they're like, hey, we need your help. Because they saw our badge and guns because we weren't covered at the time. We have a guy we think, like the hottest thing, he's like, we think he's saying some weird stuff, we don't know what to do. And so we walk over and it's like raining debris and there's this guy standing there with a hoodie and he's looking up and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's where nobody is and he's like, I think they missed their mark. I was like, what? He's like, they missed the mark. I'm like, well, who missed the mark? He's like, the planes, they hit the wrong spot. So we hear this and we're thinking, what the? So I remember we grab him. We're like, hey, why don't you just come over here and let's talk where it's not raining debris. And we're talking to him, and he starts saying these things, and we didn't know what to do. And the cops were like, I'm like, we can't let this guy go. We don't know what this is. So we put handcuffs on him right away, and we search him. And then when I searched him, I found some paperwork that he had just come from court, some parole hearing. And I was talking to him, and it turns out he happened to be Greek. I'm like, are you Greek? And I start talking to him in Greek. And then I realized in talking to him, I'm like, I think this guy has mental health issues. I'm like, don't let him go, though. You don't know what this is. So we gave him to the cops. They had their car there. I'm like, take him. Make sure he gets interviewed. We don't know what this is. I don't think it is anything, but just take him.
Good evening.
And I remember the cops looking at me, and I was with another partner of mine at the time, the same agent that shielded me. They were like, aren't you going to come? And then my partner and I looked at each other. He's like, no, we're going to stay. And so I remember the cops left, and they hugged us before they left. So then we link up with some other agents. I found a small group of agents and a boss, and the boss stops us all and he's like, listen, he's like, I'm going in. He's like, whoever wants to come with me can come, and whoever wants to go, you can go. No one's going to judge you. This is obviously unlike anything we've ever seen. And I didn't look. I just stepped forward. And as we get ready to go, like over in the distance, I hear somebody scream. And then we look up. And we're like at West Side Highway, which is the street that's next to the towers. And we look up and there's somebody jumping. And then another person. And then another person. And Andy, it was just raining people. They were just, not only now are you worried about the debris coming down, because we're like
magic,
trying to shift to make sure nothing falls on us that's debris, metal. Now we're running so we don't have a human being falling.
Were there people jumping from above the impact point? They wanted to avoid the fire?
Yeah, there were jumping from, there was the fire, so they obviously couldn't get out. They were trapped. And I remember you could see them like hanging out the holes.
They showed that very briefly on the news.
They don't show it
anymore, yeah.
It was, I don't know how many people jumped out. It felt, and I'm probably wrong, but it felt like hundreds. When I say it wasn't one or two or three, people were jumping. It was raining people, and so now this is happening, and we're trying to get into the tower. We can't get into the tower, so by the West Side Highway, there's already people coming out, so we just set up a triage, and we just started helping people, and giving oxygen, doing different things, and just And then ambulance trucks were pulling up, and so the people that we thought needed help, we throw them into the truck. Some people were just in shock, like they were okay, they were covered and stuff, but you could tell they were just more like they couldn't think. And we would just be like, go to the water, just walk that way. So they'd go towards the water. And as that is happening, I remember at one point I was doing something, I was trying to get the oxygen tank to work to help this woman, and I hear quiet, like just quiet. And I look up, and there's no one there. Nobody. All my colleagues are gone. I'm like, what the? Where'd everyone go? And then I hear the sound of like, it's so hard to explain. It's just like the sound of bending steel. If you've ever been in a boat, at the bottom of the boat when you hear the noise the metal makes at the hull of a ship,
Yep.
It was that sound, but times, I don't know, 100. And I hear this sound, and I'm thinking, oh, the roof must be sliding. Because I remember the first plane hit the top of the tower, and I'm thinking maybe that's given way. I was like, and I knew because of how close I was to the tower, I was like, I cannot run this. This thing's gonna fall. It's gonna take like 17 blocks with me. So I was like, I have to hunker down. So I looked around, and I was outdoors. I was exposed. I didn't even have time to run into any place. So there was a corner of the building that I found, like a brick corner, made like this perpendicular angle. And I remember thinking, like, I'll sit here, and maybe when the tower collapses, the stuff comes, it'll shoot over my head. Maybe it'll shield me. But when they say time slows down, this is the only time in my career that this has happened. I've been in tactical situations or different things, nothing very extreme, nothing like what you've encountered. But this is the only time in my life that that shit is real. When they say time slows down, I was like, what do I need? Water. My brain just went into automatic mode. I need water. Why do I need water? I get buried. I need water to drink. I grabbed water. Then there was a metal table, and I was like, look, if steel falls on me, there's nothing that can do, but glass can kill. A lot of people don't realize that glass is just as dangerous. So,
especially high velocity.
yes. So I was like, what can I use to shield myself? So at that area, because of the way the area was designed, they had a lot of outdoor tables and patios where people would eat. You know those big heavy metal tables that people eat at outside a restaurant? I saw one. That thing it must have weighed twice my weight. I remember grabbing it and my adrenaline just kicking in, and I dragged that thing. I remember scraping the concrete with it, and I shoved it into the corner, and I'm like, all right, if the tower doesn't kill me, or whatever's coming doesn't kill me. I didn't know the tower's coming down. I really thought it was just the top part of it or a portion of it. I was like, so if that doesn't crush me, at least I've got this to shield me from glass. I've got water. I'll figure it out. And I got into that corner, and I made myself, and I'm small to begin with. I remember I made myself so small. Teeny tiny. I remember I put my knees into my chest. I was like, do I have all my toes in?
And you were by yourself. There was nobody else there with
By
you.
myself. I remember thinking, I'm like, couldn't one of these guys tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey,
So they had bolted?
Let's train.
Everybody bolted. I think it just happened so fast that everybody just went into an automatic mode, and nobody thought to say, hey, to tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey, you might want to come with us. I just ended up being by myself, and I just sat there and I waited, and it started to come down, and it was like sitting in the middle of an earthquake or inside a volcano. It was unlike anything I ever felt before. And I remember sitting there, and as it started to happen, something hit me. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I was like, this isn't what I thought. And I had that moment. I was like, I'm really gonna die. And so I was like, all right, well, I don't have a choice whether I live or die. It's not my choice. If I die, it's out of my hands. But I can choose how I'm gonna die. And I was like, I'm not gonna die afraid. I remember sitting there, and I'm not an overly religious person. I don't go to church every Sunday. But that moment, I was like, I'm gonna pray. And I started praying out loud, and I asked God to forgive me. I was like, God, I hope I've been a decent enough person, and please forgive me, and don't let me be alone when this happens. And it's interesting because I wasn't afraid of dying. I was sad because I was dying alone. It's just such a weird thing, because when you do these jobs, when you put in to do something like this, you go in with the understanding I could die doing this job. But this was something different, and although I had not been prepared to die like this, I always thought it'd be a bullet in the head or something. I was like, I'm good. But I didn't expect this, and I prayed, and I just let it come, and I remember it just turned to night, and this wave of heat and darkness just came in, and you're just watching it come. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to die afraid. I'm going to keep my eyes open. I kept my eyes open. I was like, I want to know how I die. I want to see it happen. And just this, as the tower came down, the blast came and just, even though I was already in the corner, it just slammed me back into the brick wall. And then it just started coming down. And I thought for sure, I'm like, I'm done. And I waited, and it just kept coming down. And all the stuff was coming down, and it felt like an eternity. And finally, all of a sudden, everything just goes quiet. Just like deathly silent. And I stopped there for a bit, and I was like, I think I'm dead. Because I couldn't see anything. And I remember taking my hand and putting it up in front of my face. And I was trying to look at my hand. It was like only 2 inches from my face. I couldn't even see my hand. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what this is. And then I realized I started burning because I kept trying to be courageous. I ended up sabotaging myself because all the debris and all that ash came into my eyes and was burning me. And I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I'm being brave and probably not the wisest thing to do. So my eyes started burning because all that stuff that fell on us. My skin was okay, but it was just really the orifices of the body.
Yeah.
And I sat there for a bit because I was afraid I had been buried alive. And I was like, I might be buried. That's why I can't see anything. And I waited. It might have been a good solid 5 minutes where then I put my hand out and I just started to slowly crawl out. And then I felt a wall. And again, still you can't see anything. And then eventually I saw like this light in the distance, this dim light. So I just started crawling over to it. And I stood there, and then I heard a collie call me. I don't know how he found me, and he's like, is that you, F? And I'm like, yes, it's me. And I was like, I can't see. And he's like, just stay where you are. He's like, I'll come grab you. And he came and got me, and as the dust started to clear a little bit, I looked around, and it was just debris everywhere. Firemen bleeding. And then it occurred to us, we're like, holy shit, there's another tower. If this thing came down, the other one's gonna come down. And I still did not know the tower came down. I didn't understand what was happening. It was after this was all over that they were like, hey, a plane hit, another plane hit, and the tower fell, and the other tower fell. No clue. And so after that, they took me into a lobby. There was a super there, and he cleaned my face because I was really burning, and he cleaned my eyes. And we just started evacuating people because the thing with the towers, they were so huge that when they collapsed, when they spilled over, the chunks of debris actually scraped adjacent buildings. And some of the buildings actually, they had to take them down after the whole incident happened because they were so structurally damaged because the towers fell on them. So my building, Building 7, that building collapsed. I think our building collapsed at 5 p.m. that day, but it collapsed because when the tower fell, it fell on top of it. Our building caught fire, it burned until it went down. And so even after the first tower came down, we kind of regrouped and we started pushing people out because we're like, you know what, if this one fell, the other one's gonna fall. And as we started to push people out, the second one started to fall too. Just pulling people, dragging people, lifting people. I remember I carried this one kid who, I don't know if he was handicapped, he couldn't walk, somebody was screaming, help, he can't move. We just picked him up and threw him into an ambulance. It was insanity that day. And then I remember that whole thing happened, and then all of a sudden we see, so after the second one falls, all the fire trucks, all the first responders, everybody starts bolting. And I'm on the West Side Highway, still by Ground Zero, and the firemen are on top of their trucks. Everybody run! Everybody get out of here! And I'm thinking, what else could happen? Gas leak! So everybody thought that when the tires collapsed, I guess there was a gas smell. And so all the fire trucks, everybody's blazing down the highway. And I'm on foot with my colleagues. We just start running. And we just ran as far as we could because we thought downtown Manhattan was going to explode. And so it was crazy. I can't believe sometimes it's 18 years ago, but
horizontal.
You do.
There's nothing. The right
You
portion
did the best you
can't
could.
cure.
I did the best I could, and there's moments where I think back, maybe I could have done this better, or done that better, gone in here. It just makes you sad because you just see this massive loss of life, and it was really hard to watch. All those people die, and you come from a background, and you're thinking, I'm worthless. I can't do anything.
I would say helpless, not worthless.
Helpless.
Helpless.
Yes. You felt, But you know what? To be fair, I felt like that. I felt like what can I do? And then you have got your gun on you. I'm like, what's this gonna do?
Yeah.
Your badge. Like, what? There's nothing.
Nothing at that point.
No. So that was, a really life-changing experience. And I think sometimes we get caught up in life, and whenever I feel myself kind of shift, I'm like, remember that day? Life's not so bad, or things are, it kind of brings you back. Sadly, though, there's a lot of folks still dying from the aftermath of 9/11. There's a program. It's called the World Trade Center Health Monitoring Program, which I'm part of. Every year I go, we all go, or most of us go, that we're there. They check us to make sure that we're okay, because there's a lot of people that were there that worked there or helped there, and they suffered a lot of illnesses, and there's a lot of cancers.
Yeah, the carcinogens
coming up. So, it is what it is. That story kind of thing.
Yeah, it was an interesting day, for sure. I wish our country would go back to how they behaved in the few weeks after that.
Oh, they loved us. After that, I would go in and help with the cleanup effort and that part, and we would drive down the West Side Highway. There were people lined up all over the highway. People from New York City holding up their signs. We love you, law enforcement, because only law enforcement
was allowed inside.
And first responders were allowed, and then the military came, the National Guard and all that. And they were just, and people came from all over the world to help. I remember there was where our command post, we had a command post set up, the Secret Service by Greenwich Avenue.
A mug can't cure.
And
it is an honor
one of the days, this big tractor trailer shows up, and they're hauling all this stuff, and it was like New Orleans and some restaurant from New Orleans. These people come out, they're like, "Hi, we're from New Orleans. We came up here, and we're gonna cook for you." And they just started pulling out these big tubs of gumbo and cooking gumbo in the middle of Manhattan. Awesome. And I'm like, "What's gumbo? This stuff is great." I remember McDonald's too. There was a McDonald's place, and they had a little cart, and you'd be sifting through different things, and there was a McDonald's worker, and he'd come up in the back. He'd have this towing, he's like, "You want chicken McNuggets? You want Big Mac? You want Filet-O-Fish? What do you want?" And he just
don't eat the Filet-O-Fish.
I don't like Filet-O-Fish. My husband loves it. I think it's gross.
It's disgusting. I'm pretty sure it's not fish, but I digress. I found that people, even beyond their appreciation for law enforcement, they were the most compassionate I've ever seen strangers be towards each other for a few weeks after that. Just everybody calmed the fuck down. And now that's gone. I wish it would go back.
I think it's gone because people don't. For example, so I told you I teach as an adjunct professor. My students, some of my students weren't even born.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that for them, it's something that happened in history. This happened, but it happened way over there. And I think that's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that you have to have something thrown in your face like that to recalibrate the context of who you are in your life and your station in society.
I think sometimes maybe, how some countries make people, everybody has to go into the military?
Yeah, mandatory service.
I really feel that something like that would really help people or help this country, just serving your country just so you can understand what it means and what you're doing and contributing. And then afterward, have your opinion.
It would enhance their perspective for sure and give them a greater context of where they sit and where this country sits in a world stage for sure. I don't think it even has to be, I've talked about it before. If it was mandatory service, military, cool, but also maybe the Red Cross is your thing, or Doctors Without Borders, or something. Just some service outside of yourself. 2 years, I think, would be amazing. And if they could do it outside of the U.S., I think that would be even more impactful.
Right.
But even inside of the U.S., just serve something other than yourself for 2 years. I really think it would shift perspective, and that shift in perspective would change the interactions that people have. I think it would do a lot to enhance our society as a country, for sure.
I really think that my parents are immigrants, and they're Greek. I was born here. The opportunities I've had in this country, and I love where my parents came from. I love Greece too. I would have never, ever, ever had those opportunities there. This country, to be born here, to grow up here, I am so blessed. There is nothing, and there are beautiful countries in the world, but there is nothing like the United States. It just, you can be no one, have no money, no nothing, and come here and work, bust your butt, and you can be something. There's other places in the world you cannot do that.
Agreed. Yeah, and it's tough to explain that to people if they don't go and take the time or have the opportunity to go see those things. Good opportunity or bad, however you look at it.
How long have we been talking? It feels like a really long time.
1 hour and 37 minutes. We're not done. I want to know about the presidential protective detail. I got questions.
Okay. Will your listeners stay on this long?
I don't know. It's up to them.
Okay.
Probably. I don't know. I mean, it depends on whether or not they connect with what we're talking about. I mean, I don't know how many people get to talk with Secret Service agents.
Former,
whatever, retired.
But doesn't that bother you too sometimes? That it's like, yes, it's what I did a while back.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's not who I am.
But it's a part of who you will always be, whether you like it or not. People will associate that title with you for the rest of your life. And I struggle with that one too, because I definitely don't want to be keyholed into just being that person. I have no problem with it springboarding me into whatever might be next, but I don't want that acronym to follow me, because it's not as cool as Secret Service.
You just have a cooler name. And kudos to whoever came up with that name.
I got it. It's going to be a public organization called the Secret Service.
It's true. Just when you say it to people, like, wow. But then 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, FBI, right? I was like, yeah. Oh, she's CIA.
So you put in, post 9/11 now, or years past 9/11.
Yes,
so you put in for the presidential detail.
Yes. I throw my name in the hat. I have to go through another physical training exam in my office, which is New York. I pass that. They test me, and then they send me to Washington, D.C. When you go to Washington, D.C., now you have to go through like I don't know what it's called. It's not another academy, but it's just another selection process like what we discussed.
Yeah, probably just additional training and refinement.
Exactly.
With standards that you have to meet, I'm assuming?
You have to meet those standards because there are people that do not meet them. And if you do not meet them, then you cannot go to the president's detail. Like, think of the president's detail like that's the peak. And it's just...
And when you say that... Does that mean you're working in the White House? Does that mean you're working directly with and around the president? I mean, or how broad is that term when people say the president's detail?
So the term PPD, which is Presidential Protective Division, hopefully I said that correctly.
Yeah. I have no idea. I'm going to go with you.
You know what it's like when you learn acronyms and you just stop saying the full word?
Yeah.
And so I might butcher it, but PPD, when you go to PPD, that means you live, eat, and breathe the president's detail. So everything I did before is gone, and now you are 24 hours in service of the president. So
you're straight protective. The investigations have fallen to the side.
It's all gone.
Okay.
So now I physically move to Washington, D.C. I go through the training. I pass. I go through a process where I'm helping in another division for a little bit. And then actually, before I went to the president's detail, I ended up having Barbara Pierce Bush, which is the daughter of President George Bush, one of the twins. They actually gave me her for a while. I was her assistant detail leader, which means I was in charge of her protection for it. I had supervisors above me, but I had that assignment, which was awesome, by the way. It was different because she was young. We were not too many years apart, and so she just was a much more interesting person to be around and do protection with. And she's just a great protectee. But then after that, I ended up shifting into PPD. First, I started doing the perimeter security around the White House. Whereas a lot of people don't know, but people come, they monitor, they leave stuff behind. They want to see how law enforcement is going to react, whether it's something real or a package that's just left to just arise suspicion. So
how often does that happen?
It happens.
That's what I figured.
It happens.
I wouldn't have been surprised if you said every day.
It might be every day. It happens. I think some people may forget something. I do think there's a group of people who leave stuff and then go back and watch to see how we respond.
Yep.
Which is smart. They want to see, what do we do? What do we shut down? Respond? How long does it take? What mechanisms do you
trying to understand your playbook.
Yes, exactly. That legit happened. And so I started off in that division, and then I went to the First Lady. So I was with Mrs. Obama. And at that point, there's two functions. And I can talk about this because I'm service okayed in my book, so it's okay for me to talk about it here. So we have two sections. It's called the shift, and it's called the advance. The shift is what you see that's with the protectee. When you see the president come off the plane, the agents with him, they're called the shift. And literally you're in, I don't want to use this term, it's not appropriate term, but you're in the bodyguard mode, to say. You're with him, and you're there to shield, protect, and we move, and there's a choreography to the way we move. Like, everything is perfectly designed for a specific function. That's the shift. Then there's the advance, and that's the portion of the agents that actually go overseas to prepare for the arrival of someone. So, for example, when I was on the ladies' detail, Mrs. Obama went to Africa, and I was sent to Botswana for a month. And I was there, and I worked with the State Department and the government and the South African government, working out the logistics. Guns, what do we bring, cars, all that stuff. Hotels, logistics, it was intense. That's the advance. But when you're on PPD, you do both. We just swap. When 1 week you're shift, next week you're like, hey, you're in advance, which is nice because it changes it up. But the thing is, like, your life is not your own. You live and eat that job, and I think there's a lot of sacrifices that people make, a lot of marriages that don't succeed. I think a lot of spouses that come with their loved ones and just kind of like, I never see you.
What does a day look like? Like, say you're on shift at a broad perspective. What's your wake up and go to bed time and everything in between?
So shift work sucks. Let's just put it out there. It sucked because we had, hopefully one day they'll change it, but the way our shift worked is we had day shift, afternoon shift, night shift, and then training or advance or travel. So which meant for all those years you're on the detail, it could be 5 years, you work day shift, which means 5 a.m. I'm on post, and I'm done around 1 or 2. And I do 2 weeks of that. Then the next 2 weeks, it's afternoon shift, 1 p.m. to like 9 p.m., whatever it was. And then 2 weeks of 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's
got to destroy your circadian rhythm and everything inside of your body.
I had wrinkles on my face. I looked like I was 90. It was 5 years of that. 2 weeks days, 2 weeks afternoons, 2 weeks shift, 2 weeks travel.
So you stayed on PPD for 5 years?
I'm wondering if it was a full 5. It might have been a little less than 5.
Okay.
It was
sounds like
less.
a substantial amount of time, though.
But you're doing this for years. And shift work is brutal. So when you do shift work, you can show up at the White House if they're at the White House, if they're home. But if they're traveling, then you're traveling with them. Or you're leapfrogging. So I remember once I worked the midnight shift at the White House, but that morning the president was going to leave to go to San Francisco. So as soon as I was done with my shift, I went straight to the airport.
I got a red eye.
And caught a red eye with my vest, all my gear. I get on the plane and I fly to San Francisco. To get there, before he gets there, he had maybe like a couple hours sleep. I get maybe 3 hours sleep. And then as soon as he landed, I had to be ready to receive him with my shift group at the hotel. Then he comes to the hotel and then I'm working that shift. So shift work is supposed to be 8 hours, but sometimes it can be 16 hours. There's days you're standing in front of a door, or you're in the middle of Wyoming and with snow, and you're 12-hour shifts. I think that the shift work, and then just that was hard. Just standing there, because you're supposed to stand and look. You're not supposed to be on your phone. You're supposed to be out there looking for somebody, the threat.
Yep.
And it's you have to be in this constant state of alertness. It's very hard to just be there and be quiet.
It's a grind. Chips away at you like percentage point at a time. We went through additional training for, what the hell do we call it?
Good day.
PSD, personal security detail stuff.
Oh yeah, you guys.
So we would do that. Like I've done advanced work when generals would go overseas. I did some stuff in the United Kingdom, even some stuff in the U.S. And I hated that job. I hated the reactive nature of it. Like, I'm here, everybody can see me. I can't do anything until you do something. Please don't do something. And you're just like, ha. But it just grinds away at you. Like the same thing. Stand in front of this door for even 2 hours. Like, just
hello.
If people want to understand how hard it is, literally just go stand in front of the door for 2 hours. Don't take your phone. And be alert and try to observe all the behavior of people that you see past that door, deciding whether or not they're a threat, and then multiply that by 5. And that's your average work day. And you're going to probably want to brush your teeth with a pistol the next morning. It's rough. I hated it.
Look, the job is great, but that part of it, I know in the movies it looks fantastic, and I think sometimes people don't realize that.
Sometimes in the movie, though, there's a guy standing out there watching a dumpster or a garbage can. And I'm assuming that's real.
I've done that. I've done that. Right here. I mean, it's like, agents stand here and make sure nobody comes through this door for 16 hours. Or the HVAC system. They'll put you on a rooftop because we want to protect the air coming into the building. So somebody can come and